Yes.
Perfect. Well, good evening, all, and welcome to tonight's Brooklyn Borough Board meeting for December 2022. In the interest of participants' health and safety, we are again meeting through the WebEx video conferencing platform during the ongoing local state of emergency related to COVID-19 as authorized by Section 103-A of the Public Officers Law. There are no voting items on the agenda for today's meeting. Please note that we're simply recording to comply with transparency. The recording will be available at a later date on the Brooklyn Borough President's YouTube channel. As I mentioned that there are no voting items, we don't have a quorum, but that does not prevent us from proceeding. For the purposes of thorough attendance record, I'm going to ask my colleague, Ms. Stevenson, to call the roll, please. Oh, sorry. Seems we cannot hear you.
Hi, you caught me by surprise. Good evening, everyone. Brooklyn Community Board 1. Community Board 2. Community Board 3. Community Board 4.
Hello, my lovely people. Camacho presente.
Hello, Mr. Camacho. Community Board 5. Community Board 6. Community Board 7.
Good evening, Julio Peña, Chair, present.
Community Board 8. Community Board 9.
CB9, Fred Baptiste, Chair, present. Good evening, everyone.
Community Board 10.
Good evening, everyone. J. Marie Kapichinakis, Community Board 10 Chair, present.
Community Board 11.
Manuel Lau. Board 11.
Community Board 12. Community Board 13.
Present. Zunaira Ahmed for Community Board 13.
Community Board 14.
Good evening, everyone. Joanne Brown, Chair, present for Community Board 14.
Community Board 15.
Marisa Scavo, Chair, present.
Community Board 16. Community Board 17.
Roderick Daly, Chair, Community Board 17.
Community Board 18. That concludes the roll.
Let us now.
Sorry, the council members, Council District 33. Council
This is Mariana Alexander on behalf of Councilmember Ressler. Thanks.
Hi, Mariana. Council District 34. Council District 35.
Good evening, Casey Addison here on behalf of Councilmember Crystal Hudson.
Hi, Casey. Council District 36. Council District 37. Council District 38. I saw Ed.
Concerned on behalf of Councilmember Alexa Aviles.
Hi, Ed. Council District 39. Council District 40. Council District 41. Council District 42. Council District 43.
Michael Sheldon here for Councilmember Justin Brannon.
Welcome, Michael. Council District 44. Council District 45. Council District 46.
Hi, Saya Joseph on behalf of Council District 46.
Isaiah, Council District 47.
Ayana Williams on behalf of Councilmember Kagan, 47.
Hello. Council District 48. And the Borough President's Office is well represented. And that's the roll call.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Stevenson and Ms. Church. I am, for the record, Gregory Lewis, counsel to the Borough President, chairing this meeting as designated by him by a September 21st, 2022 order. In the absence of a quorum, we'll proceed sort of according to the agenda that the chairperson we circulated. And we'll begin with the presentation from the Public Bank of New York City. Tusif Ashan is...
Anyone?
Tusif Ashan on?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. How's it going, everyone? My name is Tausif Asan. I'm with New Economy Project. I'm the public banking campaign organizer. I'm also the coordinator for the Public Bank NYC Coalition, which is a broad-based group of many different community organizations, advocates, all over the city. And what unites us is that we're fighting for a public bank here in New York City. We had a meeting with the Borough President Office, Borough President Reynoso, and they're really excited about our campaign, and we asked them if they could help us do some outreach to the community boards, and they were very nice enough to help and set us up with this meeting. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys about the public banking campaign and ask you guys for certain next steps in support. So I'm wondering, am I able to share? Let's see. I'm first going to go ahead. Awesome, I think so. I'm first going to go ahead and I'm going to try to share a video which we created. Hopefully the audio works. So I'm going to go ahead and start it. Please let me know if you can hear anything. Were you guys able to hear that?
I don't believe so. I could not.
Please share with audio. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, I'm not too familiar with WebEx. Where would I do that on? I could also, if it's easier, give the YouTube link to someone, and then if they would like to, okay. Thank you.
This is the dollar, the kind you and I contribute to our local and state government when we pay taxes. When we send these dollars to New York City, Rochester, or Albany, they turn into public funds that help pay for services that keep our cities running. But on their way to turning into schools and subway cars, these dollars travel through a shadowy corridor, a place where our interests are not served: Wall Street. The funds we send to the government need to be held somewhere. The problem is Wall Street banks that hold public money operate with zero accountability to the very people who generated these funds, us. So what kinds of investments are Wall Street banks making? They're giving loans to predatory developers and landlords while denying them to Black and brown homeowners and small businesses. They're pumping money into fossil fuels and lobbying against renewable energy. And they're funding prisons and immigrant detention centers, fueling and profiting from mass incarceration. Let's not forget these are the same banks that crashed our economy in 2008 and reaped record profits during the pandemic, while extracting billions of dollars in fees from struggling New Yorkers. Isn't there somewhere else we could put our public money? I'm so glad you asked. With a public bank, we can ensure that all of our public dollars work for the public good. Instead of lining private pockets, our money would build collective community wealth. A public bank would fund community land trusts, permanently affordable housing, and worker-owned businesses. It would invest in clean energy and a just transition in frontline communities. And it would partner with community credit unions and others to expand fair banking services and create living wage jobs. Hundreds of public banks exist around the world, including here in the US with the century-old State Bank of North Dakota. It's time to bring public banking to New York. Let's put our dollars to work for our communities and build an economy that works for everyone. Join the movement. Check out these state and local coalitions to learn more and take action.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now for the presentation. I knew it was a good idea for me to go ahead and send over the YouTube link. So thank you. The video does a really good job of introducing our campaign to folks, but I'm going to go ahead and break it down into a little bit more detail for everyone here. So we're going to learn a bit about NYC banking practices with city deposits, learn about public banking, talk about the ways in which public banks can support New York City communities, and discuss ways in which community boards can get involved. So the main problem that really brought us together with the Public Bank NYC Coalition is the big banks, right? So every single year, New York City has a massive public budget, and that comes from hardworking New Yorkers, which pay, who pay taxes to New York City. And the problem is that that money all goes through big Wall Street banks who are not investing in our communities, even though that is supposed to be the agreement that we have. They're banks that you are all very familiar with. Chase actually holds the most amount of city deposits, along with Bank of America and Citibank. I believe together they hold about 80% of the public deposits that we have here in New York City. And so the problem is that when they, even though they hold our money, which is public money, they're using it for private profit in very harmful and destructive ways. We know that these are the banks that finance bad landlords that displace New York City tenants and cause gentrification. Here's a little map that's breaking down the units that are affected by predatory equity, the money that these banks funnel into landlords that are evicting tenants and advancing gentrification. These are also the same banks that fund fossil fuels that advance the climate crisis. This is a graph that's breaking down, just in the recent couple of years since the Paris Agreement, how much in the billions the big banks have invested in fossil fuels. As you can see here, JP Morgan Chase, which once again is the biggest bank that holds most of our money here in New York City, also the bank that's leading the charge for funding fossil fuels. Which is, a huge problem here in New York City, where we're personally experiencing the climate crisis more and more, not just with heat waves that are, knocking out Con Ed's ability to give power to all of the city all at once. And in fact, when they have power issues, they're shutting off power to low-income Black and brown neighborhoods while keeping the other wealthier, whiter neighborhoods, linked in. And we've recently had a storm that's caused so much flooding in New York City that folks have died, mainly low-income immigrants who were in their basement apartments. So for New Yorkers, the climate crisis is definitely getting more and more real, and these are the banks that hold our public money, and they're investing in fossil fuels and making that even worse. These are also banks that have historically redlined low-income communities and communities of color. I'm sure, just living in New York City, you guys are familiar with the bank redlining, just if you think of which neighborhoods do and do not have bank branches, right? If you're in Brownsville or East New York, you could walk for a long time without running into a bank branch. But if you're in the Upper West Side, which is whiter and wealthier, you can't turn a corner without running into a bank branch. And that represents, the access to credit that these neighborhoods have. It's much harder for someone who's living in East New York or Brownsville to go to a bank branch and get a loan for a home, to get a mortgage, right? Or to get a loan for a small business, or just to get even regular banking services, right? To be able to open an account. These are all things that people need to build wealth for themselves and their communities. But once again, the banks that hold our public money don't even equitably provide banking services to the communities that need it the most. And historically, that has created, the racial wealth gap, generational wealth gap, and these banks are perpetuating racial and economic inequality. And these banks are huge, right? They have so much money, and that's really a lot of power. This is just a chart showing you where the big banks stand in terms of the assets that they have. The U.S. is a very big country. We have a very big GDP, and then you see the banks right underneath that. These are banks that have more combined assets than countries like Japan, Germany, the UK, right? And with all that money, they're privately making decisions as to what kind of housing gets built in New York City, what kind of energy infrastructure gets built in New York City. And they're using all that wealth to shape our communities, but not for the better, for the worse. So what can we do about this, right? Our solution, Public Bank NYC, is to create a public bank for New York City. What this would allow us to do is we would now have a public alternative to putting our money in the big Wall Street bank accounts every single year. It would allow us to divest our money from Wall Street, which are investing in these industries that are harming poor New Yorkers, Black and brown New Yorkers, and put it into a bank that we control. And it would be chartered to serve the public interest. Public banks are not a new concept. They're very popular all over the world. We also have a bank right here in America, the Bank of North Dakota. The Bank of North Dakota is a standout because it allowed North Dakota to weather the 2008 financial crash better than any other state in the country. While every other state had a state budget deficit, North Dakota actually had a state budget surplus because they had a public bank. Even during the pandemic, they also showed why public banking was very important because while every single other state in the country was lagging behind in terms of the payroll protection program loans, right? Money that the federal government set aside to keep small businesses afloat. We know through the reporting that most of that money went to large corporations that already had millions and billions of dollars, except for North Dakota. They were the state that actually got more PPP funding to actual small businesses and worker co-ops more than any other state in the entire country. While banks here in New York State during the pandemic they actually charged New Yorkers more than $1 billion in predatory fees like late fees and overdraft fees while New Yorkers were struggling the most. It would be, such a game changer if instead of our money going to Wall Street every single year that are, harming us with all these investments, we could just as easily put that money into a public bank and then we could decide to invest in all the things that our communities need. Public Bank NYC is a strong coalition of over 40 members, and we have organizations from all over the advocacy and organizing worlds. We have financial institutions and credit unions in our organization that would partner with a public bank to open more branches like the Brooklyn Federal Co-op or the Lower East Side People's Federal Credit Union. They want to provide more access to services to New Yorkers, but they would need a public bank to partner with them and expand their services. For climate justice, if we took our money out of the Wall Street banks and put it into a public bank, we would have funding to actually fund sustainable infrastructure and renewable energy right here in the city, be it through public works or by providing loans and credit to companies that want to engage in renewable energy work. In terms of worker justice, like I just mentioned, the payroll protection program, every single other state, really just lagged behind But with a public bank, we could make sure that we have an institution that prioritizes small businesses and worker co-ops here in New York City, the kinds of businesses that Wall Street does not want to invest in, right? They'd much rather invest in McDonald's, Chipotle, and other nationally recognizable corporations. And finally, for housing justice, we have a housing crisis here in New York City. Rents are getting higher. And a big part of that is because Wall Street is continuing to invest in luxury housing, even when New Yorkers need affordable housing. A public bank would be mission driven to sustain and support affordable housing with models like community land trusts that we have here in Brooklyn with East New York CLT, for example. We have many other forms of affordable housing like tenant co-ops that they could finance, right? Tenants just getting together and buying their building and managing it together, and all other forms of taking land out of the speculative market, putting it under community control so that it could be permanently affordable for generations to come. A public bank would support all of this, and this is why we have financial groups, climate groups, small businesses and worker co-ops, housing groups, and even labor unions in our campaign. So the lending priorities for the New York Public Banking Act for the Public Bank for New York City would all be the kinds of things that we would love to see investments in for our communities, but Wall Street is just not interested in investing in them because they're profit maximizers, right? Unless they're going to be able to make enough money to buy their boards and their shareholders yachts, they're just not interested. But we need community land trusts, we need renewable energy, we need small businesses, MWBEs, and all this other great stuff to be funded. We could do it with a public bank because they're mission driven to use public money for the public good, not for maximizing profits for themselves. So how are we organizing for a public bank? We have two campaigns, one at the state level, which is the New York Public Banking Act, and one at the city level, which is bills that are going through city council to eventually create a public bank for New York City. The New York Public Banking Act is a state legislation, so it's up there in Albany, that would create a framework for municipalities like New York City to create public banks of our own. Let's say we want to create a public bank today. It would be kind of tricky because the only kind of banking charters that exist legally in New York State are for commercial banks. And public banks are just not trying to do the same thing that commercial banks are trying to do. So we need the state to act to create this new legal entity that a public bank could then occupy. So that's Senate 1726 and Assembly 8290. And that's being fought for up in Albany. Then we have the People's Bank Act, which is our name for the collection of bills that we're fighting for in New York City that would pave the way for a public bank. We have Intro 498, 499, and Resolution 203 right now. These are bills that would help us answer questions that we need answered in order to move forward with our public banking campaign. One example of a question that we need answered is, what are the names and numbers of the accounts that are holding our public deposits? How much money is the city paying in fees for Wall Street to hold our public deposits? We actually don't know the answers to critical questions like this, and that's why we need these bills to give us the answers to those questions as a matter of public policy, so that we could move forward with our campaign. So how can Brooklyn Borough Board support? We would love to talk to more and more community members in New York City about the public banking campaign. We're currently doing town halls all over the city. We actually have one in Queens tomorrow. We're looking forward to organizing more across the city. But we know that community boards are, huge centers of community in your neighborhoods, and we would love to be invited to your individual community boards. We actually did one for Community Board 5 through East New York CLT, which set that up for us very recently, and we're very excited to work with them on public banking. They're very excited about this idea. After we speak to your individual community boards, we would love to get official endorsements, letters, and statements in support of our city legislation and our state legislation, so that our electeds know that their constituents really need and are excited about public banking. And we're also just open to any other ideas of collaboration that you guys can think of. If there are other ways that you guys want to support the campaign that I did not mention, we are all ears. So I will go ahead and stop it right there. I know that I saw some questions pop up in the chat. I was not paying attention to those too much since I was focused on the presentation, but I'm going to go ahead and
So
I can't find it. Oh, go ahead.
questions for Taufik Hassan after the presentation. Thank you for that. I guess to surface the two in the chat, first from Fred Baptiste, chairperson of Community Board 9. Question is, who has signed on to the legislation on the state and city levels?
So that is a good question. I cannot give you an exhaustive list right now, but I'm going to go ahead and open the tracker. So at the state level, we have, I believe, just over 50 members of the assembly who have signed on to the legislation. There we go. I'm about to get the exact numbers. So at the state level, we have 53 assembly members who have signed on, and we have 27 Senate members who have signed on. A very large portion of New York City's Democrats have have signed on to the bill in the state level. We're of course nonpartisan, but I just know as a matter of fact that that is where a lot of our a lot of our early support has come from. If you have any questions of which member specifically, if you want to know, like, hey, is my member signed on? I could look that up for you really quickly right now. But other than that, at the city level, like I mentioned, we have three bills so far, and we have 30, 31 and 30. 31, 30, and then 31 members signed on for that. So we're very close to a majority of city council support for the bills that we have on public banking. Does that answer your question? Otherwise, like I said, I can't name every single one of them, but if anyone is curious about their particular member, I'm happy to look that up right now.
I will surface the next question in the chat before going around the room from chairperson of Community Board 15, Teresa Scavos, asks, are deposits insured?
Yeah, so the folks who are writing the laws are making it so that the public banks are responsibly holding deposits, and part of that is making sure that they are insured, yes.
Chairperson Pena, you are recognized.
Thank you. Well, one, I appreciate this presentation. I think every time I see or hear a presentation for public banking, I learn something new. So thank you. If I have a three-part question. Who are the sponsors to the state legislation? Do we know if there are any cost-saving estimates for public banking? Like, would the state save any money for switching to the city's switch to public banking? And what are some things that opponents to public banking saying?
Sure. So the main sponsors of the bill in the Senate, it's Senator James Sanders, who is the chair of the Senate Banks Committee. They represent Southeast Queens. And in the Assembly, it is currently Patricia Fahey, who is also the chair of the Assembly Banks Committee, and they are representing the Albany capital area. In terms of would this save the city money, the answer is absolutely. I alluded to the fact that we actually don't know how much we're being charged in fees. If you ask the city today, they couldn't give you a straight answer because that's why we're trying to pass a law to get that information. But we know that that figure is in the millions. The city is being charged, millions of dollars by the Wall Street banks simply to hold on to their public deposits. If we created a public bank would actually generate revenue for the city just by holding deposits, leveraging those deposits with loans and investments, and then putting the profits from those loans and investments, back into those city deposits instead of charging fees and making a profit off those fees, which is currently being done by Wall Street banks. So, I don't have specific numbers for how much money the city would stand to make off of that, but we actually have an economic impact study coming out in January that would have those figures, and my colleagues are very excited because it seems like great news. They want to tell you exactly how much money the city would stand to make if we switched over to that system, because it's significant. And third, what are some of the arguments that Wall Street banks make? Well, one, I will say that they are all bad faith arguments. They're not really they're not really giving legislators the facts, unfortunately. But they're saying things like a public bank is irresponsible. It would lose the city money. And they're saying things like, we are already investing in New York City neighborhoods. Why do you need a public bank to make these investments happen? And we just know that that's not true because we have all these amazing examples of public banks all over the world, and in North Dakota. North Dakota is certainly better for having a public bank. They have not had any scandals as to the Public Bank of North Dakota mishandling the state's public deposits. They weathered the 2008 financial crisis better than any other state. They were able to give out more PPP funding to small businesses in North Dakota versus all the other states where many small businesses were boxed out by Wall Street banks. And yeah, we also have cities and states all over the country who are moving forward with their own public banking movements. California actually passed their own state framework bill, so we're actually trying to catch up to them. Now municipalities like Los Angeles and San Francisco are moving forward with their own public banking plans, and so is Philadelphia. So the movement is very strong, and the only reason that we don't have as many public banks as we could have is because the Wall Street lobby has been very effective for all this time. And ultimately it's because even though it is a drop in the bucket for them, even losing New York City's $100 billion in public deposits, they're very greedy, right? And they don't want to lose any money. So they're trying to scare legislators into not creating public banks here in New York City. I believe those were all your questions.
Chairperson Daly, you are recognized.
All right, so I have a couple of questions, and it kind of goes back to the previous question as well. Usually when we get a presentation, we only see the positive side of things that happens, but I would like at some point to get a graph of the differences and the positive and the negative of both, right? Because I know through your presentation, you will speak of the overwhelming positive of the public banking, just as the private banker will also speak overwhelmingly of why it's better to do the privatization of banking. So if we could have some side-by-side analysis of both the positive and the negative, right? So we could come to an informed decision. That's one. The second thing is, if part of this presentation, if I were to invite you to my board, if you can ask either Ms. Church or Ms. Stevenson or Mr. Lewis to send out an email of a contact for us to reach out to you to make that happen. So those 2 points. One is to the real comparison of what's happening, a truthful comparison of both, and the second one to be able to reach out and contact you if we were to do the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. I will go ahead and make sure. I know that Ms. Church does have my information, but I will go ahead and make sure that everyone is able to follow up. And as to the metrics that you're asking for, you're absolutely right. I'm here to advocate for the public bank, and I will definitely tell you my opinion of the arguments that Wall Street is making. But if you are looking for some more metrics, as I said before, we have an economic impact study, which was done with our coalition in partnership with economists. And that will give numbers as to, to answer some of your questions. That's going to be coming out in January. But, I will also say that the Wall Street has had, generations to really speak for themselves. And, I've given you some examples of what has come of, their stranglehold over our financial system. I think that speaks for itself. But, at the same time, we have all these positive, examples of what public banking has done here in the United States and all over the world. So yes, I'm happy to follow up with some more resources if folks are interested.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from any Borough Board member for Mr. Hassan? Not hearing any. Thank you once again for your presentation, and have a wonderful evening.
Awesome. So I will go ahead and follow up with Ms. Church to make sure that everyone is able to reach me. Thank you all so much for your time and inviting me into your space, and have a good night, everyone.
Next, we've got a presentation from the Million Trees campaign. Emily Maxwell.
Hi, thank you so much for welcoming me, Mr. Lewis, Ms. Church, and of course, all of the esteemed community board leaders and Brooklyn Borough President Mark Levine. I do have my colleague Hannah Empel here is joining. We just wanted to all hear your questions and your interests. I'm thrilled to be here with you today. Actually, a lot of what we'll speak about with regards to New York City's urban forest actually does relate to the past presentation. So what I'd like to try to do is I would like to try to share my screen and see if I can do it. I've also don't have a lot of experience sharing in WebEx. So I'm just going to need to make sure I can do this. And if not, I don't know, Ms. Church, if you have my presentation handy and if you would be willing to share that. Thank you. You're amazing. I really appreciate that. That is terrific. So, hi, I'm Emily Noble Maxwell. I am the director of the city's program at the Nature Conservancy in New York, and we are a leading member and the convener of Forest for All NYC, which I'll tell you more about in a moment, but that is a coalition of over 70 diverse organizations from across the city, all working on our urban forests. And we can advance to the next slide. So the Nature Conservancy, just to let you all know, we're a global conservation organization. We work either directly or through partnerships in more than 70 countries, and we have about 35,000 members here in New York City. Next slide. So we'd heard from our past presenter about some of the impacts of climate change. We know that by the 2050s, we anticipate 3 to 5 times the amount of extreme heat days and 1.5 times the amount of precipitation. So these are some of the threats that our city is dealing with. Next slide, please. The other threat is not only climate related, it's urban heat island. And that is where we have a lot of hardscape and not a lot of greenery. And we have things like waste heat from air conditioning and transportation systems, and it heats up cities. And we know that on hot days, Black and brown communities and lower income communities tend to have lower tree canopy cover, and they tend to have more heat related illness and death. Next slide, please. So one of the ways that we can address all of these issues is our urban forest. And across New York City, we have more than 7 million trees, and of course, all of the infrastructure that supports them, which I'm sure many of you think about and hear about on a daily basis. Next slide, please. The forest offers us tremendous benefits, from improving air quality to cooling and shading our streets. It can help students improve test scores. It can help folks get better in the hospital more quickly, and it can generally make our neighborhoods more livable and beautiful. Next slide, please. But we know that this is, like many resources, it is a resource that is not equitably distributed. So what you're looking at right now is a map of what's called tree canopy. So that's the big area that shades us, and canopy distribution across the city. And we can see, I should note that I live in Brooklyn, that Brooklyn does have lower tree canopy cover. And so this is a real issue of equity. Next slide, please. So we also know that tree canopy from 2010 to 2017, and we know only these dates because of the available data, is generally increasing, but we are seeing some areas of loss. So while Brooklyn increased nearly 2% in terms of that canopy spread, if we look towards the coastal areas, South Brooklyn, we did witness loss, and that was largely related to big storms like Superstorm Sandy. Next slide, please. But we also, actually, we can carry on to the next slide, please. Sorry about that. So there is, though, tremendous potential to add canopy. And that is what our focus is really about. So I'll tell you in a moment about the Urban Forest Agenda and the Million Trees campaign, but we know that in every neighborhood across New York City, and we're looking at Brooklyn community districts now, that there are opportunities for new plantings and growth of existing trees across every neighborhood, and that's without changing any hardscape. We know that existing trees will continue to grow and increase their services if they are well maintained and protected. But we also know that new plantings can be constrained by the landscape as it is today. Next slide, please. So we know that because of that, that can exacerbate existing inequalities. And what you're looking at in the map that's kind of green to turquoise is the existing canopy that we have as of today, plus the potential. And where you have darker colors, that means there's a higher potential. Where you have lighter colors, it means you have a lower potential under the existing landscape constraints. So those neighborhoods might have to think of more creative solutions, including streetscape redesign and zoning changes. And of course, we want to do all of this in consultation with local communities, but we have found largely that New Yorkers love their trees. Next slide, please. At the same time as there's this huge potential to do something that would truly cool and improve our city, historically, there's been insufficient funding for the care and maintenance of our trees, and there's been limited funding for planting new trees. Next slide, please. So trees face a lot of challenges. They face climate challenges, pest and pathogen challenges. They're not managed equally and well across different landscape types. Many aren't protected, so trees can be removed in many cases without replacement. And they also historically haven't had a coordinated vision. So what are we doing about this? Next slide, please. We are doing a few things. So first, we're doing great science and study to understand the asset. And I'd encourage y'all to take a look at the state of the urban forest in New York City. We can send Ms. Church the links later if that's helpful to distribute. And we also have published the New York City Urban Forest Agenda and launched a coalition really to support our urban forest and the equity, health, and justice benefits that come alongside it. Next slide, please. So that is where Forest for All NYC comes in. And so we can go to the next slide and we'll just land here for a moment. So Forest for All NYC has been working closely with all 5 borough presidents and the chair of the City Council Parks Committee to advance our vision, which really is about a healthy urban forest that justly and equitably delivers its benefits to New Yorkers. To do that, we have to protect what we have, we have to celebrate it, and we also have to plant more, and we need to do that in consultation with all of New York City's really diverse communities. Next slide, please. So this is a long list. I don't expect you to read all of it. This is on the website, forestforall.nyc, but I just want to paint a picture that we do have very diverse members ranging from academics to businesses to environmental justice organizations, community-based organizations, government partners, land managers, and more. And many of these organizations are Brooklyn-based. If you think of an organization that you think should be part of this, but they're not on the list yet, you can always send their name our way. Next slide, please. So when we were formulating the Urban Forest Agenda, we were really thinking about the key drivers that we need to address what our communities are struggling with in New York. That's really about health and well-being. How do we adapt to climate change? How do we ensure environmental justice? How do we let New Yorkers connect to nature? And how do we make sure that this is really treated as infrastructure? Next slide, please. So to that end, working with about 50 organizations, including several based in Brooklyn, we released the New York City Urban Forest Agenda. And our top goal is to expand the existing forest canopy, which is at about 22%, to 30% by 2035 equitably. And again, that's going to take protecting what we have and also planting new trees. Next slide, please. And so when we released our agenda, we also heard from the borough presidents. And so this is, part of why we're here today, that all 5 borough presidents, as well as the City Council Parks Committee chair, not only support the goal of achieving 30% canopy cover by 2035, but they also are committed to planting 1 million more trees, which we wholeheartedly support. At the same time, there are other actions that are needed. We need to be doing community scale planning, a citywide master plan, working on workforce development issues, changing the policy landscape, among other things. And so the agenda is quite robust, and we can also send you a copy of that as well. Next slide, please. So the question of why am I here with you all today? So your community, your borough president leadership is interested in supporting community boards to pass community board resolutions in support of the growth and maintenance of the urban forest. We do have a template for that. I think that's been distributed to many of you, and I'm really here sort of as somebody who can answer your questions about the urban forest. We can also educate your community board. We can present to them at any level of sort of scientific detail or policy perspective on the urban forest and what can be done. And we can also invite any and all of you through your community board or other civic organizations that you might be part of to visit Forest for All NYC and to learn more about the coalition and download the agenda. So we hope that you're enthusiastic about the urban forest. We'd love to see you all support 1 million more trees and endorse the urban forest agenda. And I'm grateful that y'all are here. And on the next slide is my contact information. And of course, you might have more follow-up. So happy to take questions. And thank you all so much for having me. And I see, I don't know if I should call on questions, but I think Mr. Baptiste, is that your hand up?
Proceed, Mr. Baptiste.
Thank you very much. This is a fantastic presentation. I wanted to know if there are more details, if it's in the brochure, if you'd be able to share in terms of what's the plan for management. I think that in general, we love the idea of more trees, but I'll tell you right now, we've got, I have neighbors who are not exactly happy with the tree management when they have the branches landing on their cars, because obviously we're not necessarily doing enough in terms of the infrastructure, making sure they're healthy, pruning trees and everything else. Is there a component that talks about the management, additional funding for parks, making sure that there's regular inspections, things of that nature?
Absolutely. This is, to me, one of the most important questions anyone can ask. And just like as a New Yorker, candidly, I had a huge tree limb almost fall on my head one day. Like I've seen it too, right? And this to me is a function of our city not treating this asset as critical infrastructure. And really one of the goals of Forest for All NYC is to elevate the urban forest so that it is thought of and invested in as critical natural infrastructure. And there will always be competition, of course, for budget money, but Forest for All NYC, we're a young coalition. I want to be honest with you about that. We've been around about 1.5 years. We've been working on the agenda for a lot longer, but last year we were able, through our budget advocacy, to secure increased funding for parks personnel, for maintenance, for stump removal. So absolutely, I think we're going to all have to keep pushing on that. And I can definitely say I would never, supposed to speak for the borough presidents, but when the borough presidents came to us and said, we want to plant 1 million more trees, we said, that's awesome. What are we going to do to maintain them? And they agreed that, so alongside the call for 1 million more trees, there has to be a call for the concomitant investments in maintenance. And that's why if you see the language of the draft resolution that we jointly wrote, it covers all of it. Of course, we want more trees, but if we're not going to care for them, we're actually not, doing the city justice.
Thank you. Ms. Zuniera, for Community Board 13.
Thank you. And I do want to echo that was a great presentation. I definitely learned a lot. And I was really proud to see Coney Island Beautification Project as one of your members. They're great and we love them. One of the questions I had was specifically for Coney Island about, how frequently we get hit by these big storms and how do you accommodate that in your planning going forward?
That's a wonderful question. And I always just have to shout out Pamela Pettyjohn, who's the leader of Coney Island Beautification Project. I mean, there can't be a more powerful community leader. So we love working with her. You know, when I started this most recent sort of long project in New York City, I had returned to New York City after some years away, and it was just after Superstorm Sandy. And when we looked at the coastal areas, obviously so many of our forests, so many of our parks on the coast had been decimated. I mean, that is a reality, and that is a reality we will continue to contend with. And so one of the first projects I did with the Nature Conservancy was to actually restore Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge. I realize that's not Coney Island, but that's in that same kind of flood-prone, coastal, salty, brackish, bay area. And we selected a new plant palette. And we had to select a plant palette that the roots, the colloquial thing is their feet can get wet and be salty, but basically their root systems can tolerate chronic inundation or intermittent inundation, standing water, and more saline soils. And so, what we need in downtown Brooklyn, what we need in Park Slope, what we need in East New York is not what we need in Coney Island. And so that's why we're really careful. We don't think we have one prescription. It's not one size fits all. We need to do this in collaboration with each other. And that's going to include both community prerogatives, but also the biological and the climate prerogatives. So there are ways to plant the right species in the right place, and it has to be carefully attended to.
Thank you.
Chairperson Camacho, CB4.
Yes, I love that. I have blocks in my community that are saturated with trees and covered real good, but it blocks the light. Seniors get scared. The trees are hitting the side of their buildings. The rocks, the bricks are picking up, the roots are picking up the rocks. They've been there for so many years. You got landmark areas, but no funding for pruning and trimming and taking care of it. Maybe also some areas have open spots, but the only reason why they can't plant the tree there is because there's gas pipes and electrical wires and stuff. When are we gonna, if you're building a new building and they're putting a new pipe, move it a certain place where you can plant the tree there in that location? Some places you see one tree here, you go 6 or 7 houses back and there's none. So now, also maintenance in regards, what comes down with the leaves in the winter, leaves. And then when the leaves go down the gutter, if we don't pick it up, then we get clogged. Then there's a rainstorm, now the gutter's clogged and all our basements are clogged. Think about that. We really need to, the more you plant, the more work you gotta do. We all gotta do, because it clogs the drains, the storm drains. We don't clean. People blow it into the street instead of putting it into a bag and bringing it there for them to pick up. Cause leaves is recycled. I worked in Greenwood Cemetery when I was 18 years old. All the way, I did 12 years in Greenwood, and that's one of the most beautiful places. Is there, the cemetery on 25th and 5th. You know it very well, because I know you do. You go there, the grass is green. You see how beautiful, and there's a fence around it because people are dying to go in there to see it.
So you're speaking my language. I will say Greenwood Cemetery, you are right. I do know it. I do love it. I go there. I watch the birds. I see the trees. It's where I became a citizen pruner, full disclosure. I got my little card so I can prune New York City street trees. And I think they're such a terrific example of really good tree management.
I worked there for 15 years.
Amazing. And so you know what it takes. And so actually Greenwood Cemetery is a member of Forest for All NYC. And one of the kind of main areas that Forest for All NYC believes in is that our urban forest, if well managed, and this is a big if, has a tremendous potential for workforce development. Because we know that a well-managed urban forest that New Yorkers deserve, that it will take more jobs to take care of it. So one of the main elements we are working on right now is trying to identify opportunities for better workforce development. So for example, we've been working with New York City Housing Authority to employ young folks from NYCHA to inventory and create sort of plans moving forward for trees on NYCHA campuses. So I really agree with your concerns. And what I believe is that it actually will take all of us, including, and I have to pitch again, if your community boards are willing to sign a resolution, we need to call on the city to make those investments. It's not going to happen without our voices. And I really think your concerns are important and well-founded.
Chairperson Daly, Community Board 17.
Hi, it kind of goes, I think, it's around the same line of questions. We want the trees, but I would like to know if we can work with governmental agency to make them, in the laws, as we put more trees down, that we look at making them more responsible for the maintenance of the tree and not the constituents. Because even though we might want a tree in our community, our neighborhoods, if something were to go wrong, then it goes back to the residents, and that becomes a financial burden, especially as we look at seniors or people who just really can't afford that component. So is there a way for us to assist you in part of that legislation to make it part of the government or agent responsibility for them to take care of the maintenance of the product and not just back on the constituents?
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Daly, I think that is the right question. And, I want to say, I smiled when I talked about becoming a citizen pruner, but our urban forest can't be tended by volunteers alone and by private citizens alone. So I really wholeheartedly agree with that. The Parks Department is responsible for about 53.5% of that overall tree canopy. Then there's an additional portion that is by other public agencies, and that is very unmanaged. And then there is, of course, about 36% of the tree canopy on private property. And, my belief is, and one of the things urban forest, the New York's Forest for All NYC is calling for through the urban forest agenda, is that we need a master plan for our urban forests, and that master plan needs both the capital, right, where are we putting more trees and what kinds, but also the maintenance and operations, and that we need, so I used to work with the Parks Department, so we just heard about our friend who worked for Greenwood Cemetery. I used to be at Parks, but I guess I really believe that yes, we need our city agencies not only to have a stronger mandate around caring for the canopy, but they need more resources. So I think together we can make that call to the city and really impress upon the administration, the budget negotiating team, that these are critical resources.
Chairperson Brown of Community Board 14, you're recognized.
Hi, thank you very much. Good evening, and thank you very much for your presentation. My question is around, is there a synergy between your coalition and, let's say, the Department of Buildings, where trees are mandated for new development? So for example, I have at least 8 tree beds in a 1-block radius in the north of CD 14, where the developer has not planted the trees that they were required to. And how is your coalition involved in that, or how can they be involved in that?
That's a great question. And in some ways, I'll just share with you, Ms. Brown, that might be the hardest question. And the reason for that is we know that not only is 36% of the canopy or 35% really on private property, we actually know a lot of the potential for canopy expansion does sit on private property. So we know we need to be activating private property spaces. We have a lot of creative ways to do that. And we also think that the borough presidents have a role to play here, as well as city council members and community boards. So we are always happy to, pay attention, make a phone call. We have engaged with a lot of private landowners, and we're very proud of that. So the Real Estate Board of New York is actually one of our members, and we believe that, we need the environmental justice folks and we need the real estate folks and everyone in between. So we are very interested in expanding trees on private property. we think that that will need to happen through both incentives and through regulation. So I know some of the things that some of the borough presidents have been talking about is paying more attention to trees, for example, through the ULURP process. And then, we've thought about, should there be a tax incentive, or could Con Ed, provide a utility bill break for planting trees? Because actually that is something that happens in other cities. So I don't have a perfect answer for you, but we're happy to take a specific look at that site. And I think if there is a compliance issue, right? So that, like, if this is an issue around compliance, like technically the Department of Buildings really is not supposed to issue a certificate of occupancy until all the terms of a building's sort of requirements have been met. So I'm a little concerned that what you're talking about is more of a compliance issue, and I'd be happy to talk with you offline about how we might support you in addressing a compliance issue. But broadly, yes, we're very interested in private property from the incentive to the regulation side of things.
Yeah, thank you for your answer, because then this sounds like a much easier thing to deal with, because this is not private property. This is a compliance issue. When a developer builds a building, they are required to plant street trees, and that is determined by the Department of Buildings. And that is not being adhered to, at least in the north of the district of CD 14.
Okay.
So that sounds like a pretty easy fix from what you're telling me, because we're not actually talking about the private land. We're talking about what they were mandated to do.
And then actually, let me just add, so DOB, if I don't know all the details of the property, but I think if I were in your shoes, I would call Parks, because Parks sets the standard for street tree planting, like there, and they probably have to sign off that it's done, but DOB should not issue any type of certificate of occupancy without all requirements met. So I would call both, just to cover all your bases.
Okay, great. So yeah, let's definitely connect offline. I have your email address. Thanks so much for your presentation again.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions for Ms. Maxwell? Million Trees Project. Any other questions from Borough Board members? Hearing none, once again, thank you very much for your presentation. May you have a wonderful week.
Thank you for having me.
To activate the trigger in my office, the light trigger. I'll be right back. Moving on with the agenda, there being no unfinished business from the prior Borough Board meeting, from the November 2022 Borough Board meeting, we now turn to some new business. There's also an opportunity to discuss some updates. And I would like to begin by presenting two that the Brooklyn Borough President wants to make Borough Board members aware of. The first, the town hall that has been mentioned to you, that there was a presentation from the Land Use Department here at Brooklyn Borough Hall, at the office of Brooklyn Borough President. There will be a town hall where the presentation on the comprehensive plan that this office is working on, that town hall will be on Monday evening here at Brooklyn Borough Hall. That is Monday, December 12th. We wanted to flag that for you all, as the town hall is an opportunity for you to engage, to have sort of a first look at some of the findings of the comprehensive plan, and to be prepared for that discussion. Flag that in terms of importance, but there's another update to provide you with all, and that is something that's happening more sooner. And on Thursday at 5 p.m. here, there will be the annual tree lighting ceremony here at Borough Hall, to which everyone in the community is invited. Please get the word out for that tree lighting ceremony. Those are the two prominent updates. I'll just sort of briefly turn to Ms. Church and Ms. Stevenson in case I missed anything else that we wanted to bring to the Borough Board's attention from here in Borough Hall or at Borough Hall?
No, State of the Borough Address, January 10th, 2023. And tomorrow, CB member training workshop on reviewing BSA applications as well as ULIP applications. Thank you.
Yes, our training series continues tomorrow. That is, yes, we forgot. So please get that word out. Okay, I see that as I was announcing. To the question as to whether the workshop will be recorded, I imagine you mean the training workshop that's scheduled for tomorrow. And the answer is yes, it will be recorded. Pardon, it will be recorded. To answer Chairperson Baptiste's question. Chairperson Daly, so you had your hand up on new business, so please go ahead.
I'm just asking something for clarity. We had passed a resolution for that all board members needed to be in person for the community board meeting. And then I got the message about the state of emergency. Does that apply to the community board meetings, although the resolution that passed that board members need to be in person?
So I assume, Chairperson Daly, you're referring to the Borough Board resolution that allows for hybrid meetings. I can't speak to, or I understand from sort of general knowledge in talking to your office that Community Board 17, speaking to the Community Board of which you're the chair rather, that Community Board 17 also passed what I understand was a hybrid resolution. The bottom line idea is this: so long as there is a qualifying state of emergency, the law, that is Public Officers Law, Section 103-A, allows a community board to operate fully remotely. Hybrid, the need for either hybrid or in person only applies where there is no state of emergency, either at the New York City level or the state level. And again, these are states of emergency where the community board determines that its ability to meet in person is impaired or inhibited by the reasons for the state of emergency. So long as that is true, remote meetings are permitted under that law, and that law is going to remain on the books until at least 2025 by its own terms. So this is another way of saying, as long as there's a state of emergency, there's a continuing, ongoing state of emergency in the New York City or state level for COVID or any other state of emergency that a community board finds to be a reason to go fully remote. The law authorizes the community board to go fully remote, to continue to do what they have been doing all throughout the age of COVID-19. Does that answer your question?
No, not really. I think my question has, again, just some clarity. Hold on. It's around the clarity of whether or not, because we have, I just want to know, because we have the hybrid, no more hybrid for community board, because you're saying that if we're going fully remote, it's fine, but I want to know, does it have hold on the resolution to have in-person community board members non-hybrid, or can we say, because board members are asking, and my answer is, the resolution passed says that there's no more hybrid, but now I got the notice that said that we're under a state of emergency. So your answer is not really clear to me about whether or not, right, whether or not I have to consider, being that there's a state of emergency, that members at this juncture, until it's lifted, can do both. Because that's the question. And because the reason why I'm asking that, again, it does affect me having quorum. Because we have a large number of people, the elderly or whatever the case is, who don't come out. And they say, well, there's a state of emergency, but then at the same time, I'm like, but there's a resolution. And the state of emergency doesn't really state that the resolution offsets whatever is said. So, no, I'm not really clear about that.
I understand your question. Quite simply, if the community board has voted to meet in person, the meeting's in person. That's the entirety. However, community board decides to meet is how that governs. The law gives options, doesn't require. That clear?
I'm sorry, I missed the second thing you said.
Sure. I said, however, a community board decides to meet is how the community board meets. That the law gives options, it doesn't require. So, for example, if a community board during this pandemic in 2021, a community board had decided that they wanted to meet in person, that would have governed. That is the community board's decision as to how it meets trumps anything else.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Chairperson Brown.
Good evening. Thank you for recognizing me. Unfortunately, we didn't have quorum earlier today to address the minutes, but I just wanted to add a small change to the minutes so then when it's resubmitted for the January meeting and hopefully we have quorum to accept those, that will be made. In the first paragraph, very, very minor change. After my name, the affiliation to CD14 is not there. So if you wouldn't mind making that change for January. Thanks so much.
Definitely taken under consideration. Thank you for raising that. Chairperson Baptiste, followed by Chairperson Camacho.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Similar with regards to the minutes, I think last month there was a discussion about us trying to workshop a potential resolution that the board could consider about exploring further options for hybrid meetings. I know I personally, I think a number of other chairs as well had expressed some concerns around the parameters that had been approved by the legislature, and we wanted to be able to take that up in terms of making, seeing if it was possible for them to kind of make any adjustments legislatively to make it, to really kind of in the spirit of the legislation, make it easier for participation without going through some of the the requirements of you have to have 50% quorum in a physical space. So if we could add that to the minutes, and also if there's any update on that one, or we'll take that up next month.
Correct, Chairperson Baptiste. We did in fact draft a resolution. It will be considered for the agendas for future Borough Board meetings. It did not make the agenda for this month's meeting. That, of course, would obviously be an action item. So strategically, it would be to our advantage to put it on the agenda for a meeting where we expect to have quorum of the Borough Board. But yes, it has been drafted. It was circulated. I don't know if it was circulated to the Borough Board, but we'll get it over to on the agenda for a future meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chairperson Camacho.
Yeah, I just have a little concern that that we all our boards and our district managers have to be here. I know there are council persons that need to be here in order to create a quorum, and we hold to our standards in regards to all our board members that are not and are in the meetings when they are absent. So this is like a slap in the face to not have quorum when we have council reps that should be on there that are not here, and we hope that you address to them that their concerns are really needed, because we have issues in our community and we want to see them here just like every other, and they should be hold the same standards as us not being here. So I think us not having a quorum is kind of I don't know.
Understood and clear, Chairperson Camacho. Certainly noted that, and we will ensure that is reflected in the minutes of today's meeting, this evening's meeting.
And I know that two of my council persons should be there in the meeting on this borough board, because there are important things, and they get paid. We don't get paid.
Certainly noted, Chairperson Camacho. Thank you. Is there any other business or which can include updates from members of the Borough Board? I do see your hand, Chairperson Daly. I will see if anyone who has not yet had a chance to speak on updates or new business first before we turn to the second round of. Oh, there's a hand up in the bottom. At least the bottom of my screen, I should say. Is that Ms. Witherspoon?
Yes, it is. Good evening. I just wanted to note, because I came late, and I do apologize for that, but I wanted to make sure that I was that I made the attendance.
Yes, we have reflected your attendance in the records. Thank you.
Also, I just have one more question. That presentation that we had, will we have copies sent to our offices, our district offices?
Do you mean
presentations that we had? Yeah.
Well, yes.
Okay. Wonderful.
Said that we have them, or we can ask for them.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Ms. Church.
Hi. Would Darlene please identify themselves and your affiliation? Thank you. You can put it in the chat if you're in a phone and cannot unmute yourself.
Anyone else? First rounds of new business or updates? Any other member? I believe your second vice chair, Ahmad, CB 13.
Yes.
Recognized again.
Yes, because our other chairs and first vice chair are not here. I believe chair of CB13 did send in a question about if the land use committee votes something down, if it does go to a full board. We've gotten some conflicting answers, so we just wanted clarification there.
You've gotten conflicted answers from whom? I think that's the first piece.
I'm not too familiar. I was just asked if I am representing at this meeting to bring it up, just to see if we can get some more clarification. But we'll also follow up via email.
So the short of it is, at all times, as always is the case, if the law department tells you something, the law department, they are attorneys for all New York City agencies, and whatever their views are, the agencies have to follow them. But what we communicated is where, unless the bylaw, or the short of it is, if a committee votes something down, the full body is permitted to have a different vote or different view. The reason for this is, by default, committees are advisory only. They can offer a view. In order for committees to have binding power, for them to make decisions on behalf of the bodies that create them, the body has to give them that power. The body would typically give them that power in the bylaws. If the bylaws do not contain a provision that says something to the effect of the committee has the right to make the decision, then anything that a committee says is advisory, a full body always has the power to override the committee or to come to a different decision. That would be the general legal principle.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Other new business or updates, which can include updates from Borough Board members. First round. Hearing none, we'll come back to you, Chairperson Daly. I think you had another question or another update, rather.
Just invitation that our Parks and Beautification Committee is having a tree lighting in our local district at the Connecticut Park. So I'm inviting all of the CB members, especially those who are our neighboring members, to come out. It's at Patigate Park, which is on Albany Avenue between Foster and Farragut. So, and it's December 16th, hosted with the council member Farrah Lewis and Sesame Flies, Elite Learners, God Squad, and East Flatbush Village, along with Community Board 17. So I'm just extend that invitation to everyone, Friday, December 16th at Patigate Park. So anyone who wants to come out and enjoy, and we have a toy giveaway and the likes. A flyer will be, I'll send a flyer to Ms. Church so that she can disseminate it to all of the boards.
Thank you very much, Chairperson Dale. Okay. Any other new business? Last call. New business or updates? Hearing none, just a reminder that we next meet in the new year on Tuesday, January 3rd, 2023. The proposed agenda for this meeting also includes our entire meeting schedule through the end of the fiscal year through June of 2023. Looking forward to seeing many of you at the town hall. But if I do not see you, may you and your families have very happy holidays and happy New Year's, and we will see you in 2023. This Borough
Same to
Board
all of you.
adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Happy holidays,
Happy
everyone.
Miss
holidays.
Church, Miss
Happy
Church,
holidays, Merry Christmas, and whatever you celebrate.
Happy
Miss
holidays.
Church, this is
Happy holidays, everyone.
Yes.
Man Lau from Board 11. Just want to make sure that you mark me present.
So sad. I want to object to adjournment, but I guess next meeting.
No quorum, Chairperson Baptiste. So not entertain that motion anyway.
Phenomenal job. Always a pleasure. Everyone take care, and we'll talk soon. Everyone be well.